Welcome, Professor Simon. Thank you so much.
Oh, Martin, it's a great honor to be here. Thank you for having me on your show. You do lots of amazingly good, interesting topics. I watch your show. And it's great. Thank you. We cover a lot of similar stuff, and I like your approach. So to be on your show today, thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Totally my pleasure. And now, I first, I saw you on Chris Lido interview. And what a great guy he is. And and then, people have been contacting me. So you got to get Professor Simon on your show. So here you are. You made it.
Okay. Thank you for having me. Chris is great. I live in France. Chris lives down the road in Portugal. And we talk on email on a daily basis. And we often have different views on things. But that's great because we cover subjects where we can discuss it, and I'll have one approach and he has a different. Not that we have any animosity. We just like each other's different approach. And that's great. He's a good guy.
He is. I got to tell you a funny story about him. So I watched Chris several years ago in his very first talk about, someone sent me a link. You got to watch this guy. And he was talking about how he was debunking the debunkers, meaning Mick West's opinion on the Tic Tac. Sure. And he was pointing out all these reasons why it couldn't be what Mick was saying it was. Right. And so I contacted Chris. I figured out how to do that. And I got a hold of him and I said, hey, I'd like to have you on my UFO show. And he almost backed out. He said, he wasn't going to be on someone's UFO show. And then he pulled through. So it's the first one to actually interview him about, the UFO topic. And then, we met up in Washington, D.C. at the hearings. And it's been a lot of fun. He's a great guy. Yeah. Lots of fun.
Nice guy,
so let's hear a little bit about you and what, how did you get interested in this topic?
I wasn't interested in the topic. I think that's a good way to start. I mean, a bit like Chris. I mean, I mean, certainly working in broadcast television, I work for BBC and PBS and National Geographic. I mean, they wouldn't touch a UFO with a barge pole, which is a mistake because they are real. UAP are in our, on our planet. We've had them for thousands of years, and we need to understand what they are. And I was just kind of interested in it. I think the main thing that worked for me is every time I did a film on YouTube about molecular biology or physics, nobody watched them. And
wow.
As soon as I started getting into the kind of UFO subject, it got more interesting. But I was still very skeptical. Really, if you look back in some of my early films, I was like, they're not real. You're seeing stuff. I don't know what they were. And I started interviewing wonderful people like Paul Devereaux, who's a fantastic chap, who wrote a book called Earthlights. And he thinks that Earthlights are real. And he thinks that they might be, UAP might be an Earthlight, which is a natural geological, maybe piezoelectric or seismic event that is often seen before before earthquake.
Right.
Although they're not only associated with earthquakes, they can be seen in other areas. Maybe with earth pressures and things. He's very interesting. But Martin, the real key to get me really hooked, and the first piece of evidence I heard was a viewer pointed me and said, you need to speak to Sergeant John Burroughs. John Burroughs is somebody who actually saw something at Rendlesham Forest and was injured, bodily injured by a phenomenon while he was in the U.S. Air Force in Rendlesham Forest. And it was during COVID, and he had COVID, and we were, and eventually, after about a couple of years, we had this long phone call, and I was blown away. John Burroughs has actual symptoms of an exposure to the highly strange, to exposure to advanced frequencies and plasma and all kinds of stuff, and he is so interesting to people like Dr. Kit Green from the CIA and Gary Nolan. I mean, whatever he experienced was really happened. And he's not he's absolutely straight in what he saw. I mean, he saw lights, he saw energy, and he describes in Rendlesham Forest how he was affected, how his eyes are affected, how he had time dilation, and how eventually his body was affected. You know, this is a 21-year-old fit dog handler, and he had the heart after effects after it happened of a 50, 60-year-old man. I mean, he had valve damage and eye damage and skin damage. And, you know, I suddenly started becoming very interested in what really was it that he encountered in this place called Rendlesham. So for the last 4 years, I've been diving into my old home country, Britain, to see in 1980 or before what was going on in this strange county called Suffolk. And I've uncovered a lot. It's very, very interesting story.
Yes, and we talked a little bit off air. Actually, you know, I can't recall who it was because it was a long time ago, but I did have someone on from that area, general area, Suffolk, and they said that there's things going on, you know, the cryptid stories and all kinds of, you know, and cryptids is such a bizarre thing in itself. And you know, I mean, one of the things I think I heard you mention in one of your episodes was the possibility of another dimension or something along those lines. And, you know, I think that's absolutely a sound possible theory, you know, because so many of the things sort of can point to something we don't understand. Now, also science related, you know, we only have, I always think about this, we only have senses to see and feel so much around us, and it's a very small sliver of what's actually, you know, available that could be there.
I go brilliant, Martin. That's absolutely that's the basis of what I think as well. I mean, I think I would go even further than that and say we, as what in physics world is called far field, this is atoms which are coherent, atoms which are bonded with electrons and protons and are stuck together to make stuff, are very unusual. I think in some ways we're the aliens. Most of the universe, most of everything out there is ionized and is disassociated individual atoms, mainly hydrogen and helium, but it's in an ionized state. There's no reason why an ionized disassociated gas might not, and there's good evidence why it might also be have consciousness, why it might be self-aware, why it might be a non-human intelligence. And the more I've looked into that, I was speaking to this guy the other day, a German guy who's really into UFOs, and he's great. And he said, Simon, seeing a UFO is a bit like sniffing the exhaust pipe of a car, where you smell the gas, but you don't see the car. And I went, oh, that's really interesting, because the UFOs or UAP might be in a different dimension, as you've just said, Martin. I mean, they might be out there, but we don't even begin to realize what was really behind that veil. We're seeing a vestige, a sign of their exhaust pipe. We're seeing a light, we're seeing energy, but we're not really seeing what they are. And I don't think they want to see us to see them either. I mean, I think that they're like maybe looking at us, observing us. We're really weird people, and
yeah. So I gotta.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, no, I'm just going to tell you, I've said this probably on my show 10 times over the years, but it's very interesting to me still, because to ponder it, and I wanted to throw it at you and hear what you had to say. Years ago in the 1990s, I had before I started doing the show, or even really had much of an interest in the topic, I had an insurance broker at my house for a life insurance policy, and we got to talking. Afterwards, he said, well, I was in Vietnam. And I said, well, that must have been really a terrible experience. He said, well, not for me. I had a very interesting experience. And I said, really? What's that? And he said, well, I worked for a segment of the Air Force that was looking to see what were the UFOs during napalming. And we really looked deeply into what was going on, and other events. And so I said, wow. And so the government was actually interested in that. And basically at the end of when he was leaving, I said, hey, by the way, what does the government think that
Yeah.
they want? What do they want?
Yeah.
Or what are they and what do they want? And he looked at me and he said, "We're a petri dish." That's what he said. And
Brilliant
anyway,
story.
I've tried to get a hold of him and I can't find him. And I remember it was Tom Bowden. And I've looked, I found an insurance broker in the Midwest, Tom Bowden, wrong guy. So I couldn't find an obituary or anything. So, but anyway, I would really love to talk to him today.
Well, that's a really interesting story. That definitely goes down in my notebook, because what I've been told and what I've researched is that UAPs can be evoked by humans. I mean, Jesse Michaels had this guest on that said that there was redacted footage of UAP during atmospheric nuclear tests, and actually had some footage of one dropping out of a test, which was erased and then eventually released. And what I've been hearing in Britain, when Britain was meddling with high energy physics to earn money to join into the big boys club, the SDI program, they were messing around with something called non-nuclear EMP at this place called Cobra Mist. And every time they fired it, or every time they powered it up, they saw strange lights in the sky. And I'm not making this up. They actually told inshore fishermen who were doing crab and lobster fishing off the coast of the Cobra Mist site at Orford Ness in Suffolk, right next to Rendlesham Forest, that they would see possibly lights in the sky and hear strange noises, and that it wasn't advised to linger in that area in front of the test site. And there's so many stories, things that people have seen over nuclear power stations and over nuclear weapons stores.
Yes.
The big thing about Rendlesham is that everybody thinks that there was a few nuclear weapons store at this place called Bentwaters. I know the truth. Bentwaters had a few tactical air-to-air Poppy nuclear tactical missiles if they could shoot down Ruskies if they invaded Europe. But right next door, and nobody knows this, and you go there today and you can see where they were, was one of the biggest atomic weapon stores of hydrogen bombs at the sister airfield called Woodbridge, because Woodbridge was the store for something called forward weapons. That's where, if it was a program started in the US, if the US ever were taken out and couldn't retaliate, allied countries like Britain and Holland and Italy and maybe Turkey, I'm not sure, definitely the three that mentioned, Italy, Holland, and Britain, had this weapons store that could be under dual key, meaning permission of two countries, be used to retaliate. And because they were secret, they were kept at Woodbridge. You're talking atom, hydrogen bomb, country killers. And, was that something that would have attracted a UAP? Well, we know that they're interested. So, yeah. I can't hear you. Just a second. Oh, you're...
Sorry about that. That's me. I was moving my mic and I muted it. Sorry. So one other thing that was really interesting. I love doing these shows. I don't edit anything either. That Tom Bowden told me that he said, and they are very interested in nukes. That's what he said. And he also said, and nuclear power plants.
Yeah, anything nuclear.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's what, the same person told me back in the 1990s. But anyway, I think it's all fascinating. And I want to tell you, here's a question for you. Why do you suppose, and this is just your idea of it, why do you suppose that an area like Rendlesham Forest has recorded all these weird things for so long? What do you think is unique about it and other hotspots? I might as well go there. And why so many things happen?
That's a really fascinating question. I wish I kind of knew the answer, but there is definitely, the answer is yes. I mean, people talk about Skinwalker Ranch, but then you could talk about Lourdes. You could talk about lots of sites around the planet that I use the term, it has a thin veil. It means that some reason that these places seem to a lot of people have encounters or see strange things, apparitions, the Virgin Mary, cryptoids, or UFOs and things. And Suffolk specifically has a history of that long before the NATO, long before the US Air Force were there, for centuries. If you look back at places like Sutton Hoo, where a giant king was buried in an underground tomb with all his worldly goods in a ship, right next to Rendlesham Forest, and there's many stories in Suffolk of time traveling and weird stuff. And then that's why I was so interested in the guest that you've just recently had called Laurie. And she, was at Bentwaters in the 1970s and 80s, and she saw things, cryptoids and other stuff before the UFO so-called incident. And I think you need to understand what she was seeing. It starts making sense of what might have really happened in December 1980. I think it's a combination, in my personal opinion, and I don't really know. I'm just from research, is that Suffolk is strange, and humans were meddling, and they did something which was really dangerous. And I think things were attracted to an area which was possibly more open for things to appear, but then sadly people were injured. Charles Holt, Deputy Base Commander Charles Holt from Bentwaters, we need to really pin him down and ask him what he knew about what was going on. He can't have let people, his service personnel, out in the forest without at least knowing that what they were doing was a mission, was an exercise, and was potentially dangerous. Who knows? There's lots of questions to be asked.
Yeah, one of the conversations I've had with Charles over the years was, I was talking to him a lot when he was building a house and making this incredible, efficient house. But anyway, in the conversation, he said, I really, really wish that it never happened. I really, really wish I was never a part of it. He said, I put it away. I don't think about it. And I put it up on a shelf. And then every once in a while, when someone contacts me, I have to take it off the shelf and be there again. It was a dramatic situation, for him. And but it's one of the top cases, I think. You mentioned John Burroughs.
Yeah. And the others. I mean, John's not the only person that was injured. John's case is quite public. I mean, and John Burroughs' case afterwards is just so emblematic of a system that was trying to cover something up. Because it took 15 years for John, now retired through the VA, to actually have any compensation or treatment or a settlement of injury during service. And at first, they actually denied that he was actually in the Air Force. It took, it was hysterical.
Crazy, huh?
It took the persistence of his senator, John McCain, and his senator's assistant to actually dig out the VA records. The VA just weren't given access to John Burroughs' records, service history, or medical records, so they couldn't grant him any treatment or disability. And it eventually came out. It was only because that in the United Kingdom, a report called the Condign report, which was the end of the MOD, Ministry of Defense UFO desk that Nick Pope worked for a short time. They eventually summed it all up, did a summary, took a really senior RAF pilot and engineer, I know his name, I won't tell you, to look at all the past records and produce a report which was basically what had happened in Britain, and it was then going to be a lookup report for the MOD to answer ministerial questions in the House of Lords or the House of Commons, and they would drop doing any more research. And in this Condign report, which eventually became declassified, it talks about how U.S. service people were injured in the twin bases of Bentwaters and Woodbridge. And when John Burroughs got hold of that through John McCain's office and showed it to the DOD and the VA, they settled, because the British government have an official report saying that Rendlesham Forest really happened and service people were injured. So they couldn't argue anymore.
Yeah. I mean, so what do you think about, I mean, that's the big one in my my book, Rendlesham.
Yeah.
I've always said it's way up there in the top 5. And what do you think of some other interesting ones that you've looked into? The Tic Tac, I know recently you did a show.
Sure.
I thought that, Ross Coldhart talks about the possibility these are Lockheed Martin, or he came back on because so many people contacted him about it, and sort of, said that maybe some of them are, or you reverse engineered from something original. And I'd like to, it would be awful nice to know what his source was on that.
It would be. I mean, I'm a bit frustrated sometimes with Ross. We know each other quite well, and we contact each other. And some of the times I think he kind of slightly watches what I'm doing and kind of reports on it without credit, which is a bit annoying. But I mean, about 2 years ago, I was contacted by Jeremy Reese, who has a major YouTube channel on this subject, and a more private researcher in Canada called Joshua Bertrand, who told me that the Tic Tac was man-made. This was 2 years ago. And not only man-made, they said who had made it, where it was made, and how it works. So I was going, tell me. And, it was their research, not mine. I just reported on it. And what they are claiming, and they have documents to prove at least this project happened, was that and this is really interesting, it's not the Department of Defense. It's got nothing to do with the Navy. The Navy would never know about this. It's the Department of Energy. The DOE. Wow. Yeah, the DOE are a massive department, and in fact, they still are in charge of UFOs. Because UFOs fall under the DOE. There's nothing to do. The DOD are looking for is it a threat to national security? Well, that's their job. But the DOE are looking at the physics of UFOs. So they know about these things. And the DOE also have a lot of laboratories. Oh, they have this kind of a good one called Los Alamos. They're really serious, and also all their, laboratories in Chicago in place. I mean, they're massive. And what Jeremy and Joshua told me and showed me the paperwork is that the DOE were commissioned by NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, to make a type of pseudo satellite, a satellite that didn't orbit, but was so high in almost low Earth orbit, but not orbiting, but something way above flight levels at maybe 70, 80,000 feet on the edge of space, that could long loiter and hover over an area of interest, like today Gaza or Iran or Iraq or Kuwait, which I should mention specifically, because that's where we have evidence that there was one. And they commissioned their Los Alamos laboratory to look at something that could hover buoyantly at an incredible height. And Los Alamos worked on this amazing variation of this material called aerogel, which they made a metallic aerogel called aeroloi, which is a foamy aluminum or titanium metal, which contains a vacuum in the cellular structure of the foam. So it's evacuated. And I've got film of it. If you get a piece of this metal, aeroloi, and let it go, it floats because it's buoyant. A vacuum is lighter than hydrogen because there's no hydrogen. And the air beneath it is dense, sea level or wherever. And the thing above it will float in and depending on its buoyancy. And their design was a 40-foot long white Tic Tac shape. And they wanted them for high-level drone surveillance at the same time as they were seen in off the coast of San Diego. And so I'm going, well, that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, this isn't Lockheed Martin. I think these are the people who did the original, possibly, of course, original research into the material science that could make a long loitering drone. Now, there's a massive problem with this, is that a lot of the reports from the Nimitz incident don't just see a white Tic Tac, which is quite emblematic of what they might have been working on, but they see something moving incredibly fast, going up from 80,000 feet to sea level within a couple of seconds. These drones don't do that. They they were negatively buoyant, they would up, and if you pressurize them, they come down, and they don't move horizontally. So there's almost no horizontal movement. They're designed to stick in the atmosphere and maybe station keep in a small area, but there's no. So it doesn't explain the full Tic Tac encounter, but the shape of the craft is very emblematic of what they're working on. So being a persistent bugger, I dived into where did the Nimitz encounter happened. Well, it happened in this place called an MOA, or military operational area. My background is a pilot, and they in an MOA you can have multiple agencies working independently without each other knowing, doing testing of aerospace. And this one, the N something off San Diego, was one of these areas where you could have defense contractors testing advanced propulsion and the Navy. And as long as they both registered their interest with a controller in San Diego, which I'd like to talk to, they could be there at the same time. So on that date, who was in the MOA? I'd like to know. Is it possible that it was DOE through Los Alamos, or then later on a production version made by Lockheed Martin testing it? It also, interestingly, I was told that this material is hydrophobic, meaning it's underwater, it repels water, it's like in a bubble. So it would be very easy to launch it from a subsea asset, and for it to pop up, hover on the top of the surface to orientate itself like the bed of a 3D printer. It can do that, no problem, and then go bing up, but no horizontal movement. And the bing up isn't the speed that was reported. It would be whoop. So is it the answer? I think there's something in it. And it's interesting now that Ross Coulthard has come out and said there's a Lockheed Martin program. I think we need to dig into what the DOE really knows about what they were working on.
Well, here's an interesting thing. I know you know of the Mike Herrera. He's been on my show, his incident, and also a person very obscure. He's only done, interviews with two people, and that's Jonathan Wygant, who I had on this show, and very, very dramatic trauma. When he talks about, he's just totally upset when he talks about his encounter, and I got him to talk about it. But it's funny you mentioned the DOE because he after he found this craft in the Amazon, and it was wedged into a rock, and there was a being hanging out and all this. After he found this, the people showed up in camo and were very black camo and very aggressive. And I said, "Who do you think they were?" And he said, they had American weapons. He says, "I think it was the Department of Energy."
Yeah.
That's what his conclusion was. He said, "I don't know for sure, but I think it was the Department of Energy that showed up." And they treated him really rough.
Well, that's probably who turned up at Rendlesham. That's what I'm hearing too. The plane that flew in either during or after the incident, how did they know, wasn't DOD. That's what I'm hearing. It wasn't from Wright-Patterson, which you would expect. And I mean, the other thing about that plane that flew in is I spoke to the person who built the C5 Galaxy C5 pad that it was pre-planned to land on, because Woodbridge was a diversion World War II base with old concrete,
right?
And at the very, very end, the eastern end, where there's nothing at all apart from the runway markers, they built in, I think, between August and December of 1980, they built a C5 pad because they were expecting a C5 with somebody and they turned up. And these were the people who were the non-DOD OSI and other people interested in we need to get to the bottom of that. I mean, I could have got my knickers in a twist, but a pad was built, a plane turns up, the OSI weren't DOD, and Holt thinks they might have been DOE. He said that to me, so.
Yeah, well, very, very well coached. And here's another incident where, talking to James Fox, who did, a lot of research in Varginha, Brazil. Immediately after that incident, Americans showed up. immediately,
Amazing.
within a day or two, which is really quite amazing. And who knows where they were from, but it does
Yeah.
seem like no matter where an event happens, that Americans all of a sudden appear, which is very bizarre. So,
well, I can't remember who it was who told me, somebody on one interview, was that as I mentioned earlier, ever since the Trinity test, ever since the DOE became in charge of nuclear stuff, they also, in their remit, was exotic stuff, anything to do with exotic physics, anything to do with energy, including the non-human intelligence, goes through DOE. As I said, if it's not national security related, why would the Air Force be involved? I mean, they might have, but the people doing the real research in what they are and how they work are always going to be the DOE. I mean, it's not going to be the Pentagon. The Pentagon might be told to go and get them or stop them, but the people doing the research are going to be the DOE.
I recently had Tim Phillips on my show, from
Right.
the AARO. He was the acting director for a while of the AARO.
Right.
And, I asked him, because I said many times on the show that I think the U.S. government knows a lot more than we do, but not the full picture. And he said, well, we've already said that we don't know what they are, but we don't. Basically, he was saying on my show that he didn't believe that the government knew any more than we do. But I do still believe that there are parts of the government, maybe compartmentalized, that need to know type of stuff. But I do believe that there is more known than, especially when we have all these incidents where apparently the DOE could be showing up. There's some part of the government that knows something more than we do.
Plus, I live in France, and I'm British. And moving to France, I was like, my mind was blown. I mean, OVNI, which is the French term for a flying saucer, is totally open here. You can make a report to your local gendarme, your police officer, and there's a form you fill in, and there's a picture, and what did you see, and what category. I mean, it all came from Jacques Vallée, who set up this system of categorization of close encounters of a different kind, and it's all public. They know that UAP exists. People see them all the time. I mean, and the same in Britain. I mean, Nick Pope and the MOD had an office. And then the Condign report, this report that I talked about, Rendlesham, and was the key to unlocking John Burroughs' VA settlement, says the conclusion of the British government, UAP are real. UAP exist, but they don't pose a threat to national security. And what they are, we don't effing know. And they have the person who wrote it has some ideas of what they could be, but the big takeaway, Martin, from this, for the US, that makes me very frustrated, is there's countries in the world that know that they're real. Why are we still debating it? The EU, for example, have a policy of aviation safety and a reporting system for EasyJet and Ryanair pilots and low-cost airlines. If you see something, it's fine. You just report it, and it goes into a database. We're not still going, I wonder if it's true. No, we know that it's true.
Yeah. I often, I don't know if anyone ever says this to you, but they say it to me. So you believe in UFOs? And I get such a kick out of that. I said, there's nothing to believe in. A UFO is an unidentified object. But it's what they are is the puzzle, what they are and why they're here.
They're here.
All that. And as a man of science, I'm going to ask you this. I've asked this of astrophysicists and people like that before. Yeah. If they are indeed visiting us and curious and all that, are we that special? I mean, there could be, millions and billions of planets that are supporting life. Why here? I mean, it's just an opinion.
Yeah, well, I'm a filmmaker who worked in science all my life. I did teach at a university at the professorial level, but I don't have a PhD. But I've worked on science films. But I do have an opinion.
Okay.
And first of all, congratulations, Martin, and all your viewers. You live in a time, 2025, where we have evidence that we're not alone in the universe. I mean, big thing. And is that public? Not very, apart from there's a couple of really good sightings that people are kind of debating. No, the universe is teeming with life. Probably Mr. Buggy, Mr. Microbe, very unlikely to be Mr. Little Green Man with a flying saucer. But no, this life is abundant everywhere. I mean, we've known that for a long time. I mean, I remember it back in the 1980s, working on science programs that say the stars out there in our galaxy that are richer with the building blocks of life that our star has, than us. So the likelihood that has made some stuck together blobby creatures is very, very likely. Why are we being visited? I think we're at a very interesting time in our evolution. I think we've evolved very quickly over the last 200 years, and where we might be troublesome. I think we definitely now have nuclear power for at least 50 to 100 years. We understand the nature of the atom. We're beginning to kind of understand quantum reality, which is obviously a bigger picture of how the universe does work, without a doubt. And I think we're also beginning to ask questions about consciousness. And if you were a very intelligent AI creature from another planet, or somebody interested, it'd be very interesting to see how a little planet, blue marble, orbiting a very minor star called the sun with these weirdos on it would be reacting to all this. And I think possibly, I'm absolutely convinced that there's non-human intelligence monitoring us. I doubt in a way that they would bother to come down into our atmosphere, maybe a probe, but I'm sure there's things in our solar system, which is looking at Earth, and they've been there for thousands of years, and they're monitoring us. Yeah, no, I don't think we're that interesting, but I think we could be troublesome.
How about that? So do you think that if we actually found, pure evidence, I know that you have talked a little bit about this, that through the different, like the James Webb, and is it Parker, but if we all of a sudden had 100% proof, and white papers could be written, and that there's life out there, do you think that the whole Earth would get on board, or do you think there'd be, it become political possibly, and they're battling each other, and no, it's not true, and but a lot of fear is the base of a lot of conspiracies or whatever, and fights, and that might rock someone's boat where they don't want to even think about that the whole situation.
It definitely would rock. It's a great question, Martin. It would definitely rock a lot of boats, but I actually think we're pretty ready for it. I mean, I think the best example of being ready for it is last year, the Vatican, bless their socks, made a proclamation to their bishops throughout the world, throughout our planet, to say, when we confirm extraterrestrial life, the policy of Rome, the policy of the Vatican is God made them as well.
That's right.
Fine. And so they've accepted it. I have a really strange story, and that is the people who aren't really telling us what's really going on are SETI and Breakthrough. Listen, I think that both of them have extremely good evidence that, early evidence, but really good evidence that there is non-human intelligence, that we're not alone in the universe. But what I'm hearing is that possibly they don't want to reveal it because they were advised, I hear this from somebody at SETI, they were specifically not Breakthrough Listen, but maybe they're doing the same. If you aren't at least 2 or 3 steps ahead of Ross Coulthard's questions, say, we found life on another planet. Oh, what do they look like? Well, we don't know. We just found a signal. What are they saying? No, we don't know. And that they were advised, SETI were advised by a paper that they commissioned, a study that they paid for, was advised not to say anything until they've got 100% proof, not to go off too early, and not to have speculative stuff, because they could appear like idiots, and that you need to be find a signal and speak to them. But don't tell anybody you've spoken to them, or at least work out how to contact them, or whatever it is, or biological signature, 100% confirm it's real, and before you reveal it. And I got into an awful lot of trouble by hearing from a group in Europe who do network radio telescopes. They take all the telescopes of the Earth, the radio telescopes, and look at all the data, and they do the processing of telescopes in Australia, in South Africa, and in Europe and America, and China and Russia, by the way. And they can filter all that, make a giant ear of Earth. We could only do that in the last couple of years. And then they have AI filtering tools to look for unusual signals. And they say, we found many sick candidates. So they're calling them candidates. And that's why Breakthrough Listen and Uri Milner's organization started looking at these candidates. So the candidate, which is the most likely one, in my opinion, but there's others I don't know about, was called BLC1, Breakthrough Listen Candidate 1. And the candidate came from signals that have already been found. And then Breakthrough Listen have thrown money at the project by hiring assets like Parkes and the Square Kilometre Array to actually look at the candidates. And I think they're real. I think the evidence for the BLC1 signal is unbelievably real. I might be wrong, but let me quickly, if you've got a couple of minutes, let me tell you why I tell you it, why I think it's right. Because I was contacted by somebody from Parkes who did the research. Now, I did an interview. I tried to interview the principal investigator for Breakthrough Listen, and Andrew Milner, and it took weeks and months to go through his office in Oxford, in London, in England, to eventually get an interview. It was like this with you, and when we came on our Zoom call, he said, "You're not recording this." I went, "Oh yeah, of course I am." And he went, "No, don't record it. We'll just talk." And he just didn't want to go on the record with it. And I really challenged him about the BLC1 signal, because here's what I heard. So BLC1 is a single point source there. And when you point the Parkes steerable dish in Australia to it, bing, it's there. When you go away, it goes. When you bing, it's there. So it's coming from a single point source, number one. Two, it's narrowband. It's electromagnetic frequencies, but it's narrow. It's not a buzz of hydrogen. It's specific EM frequencies, but they're really strange frequencies. They're not frequencies that humans use. Keep that point in your mind. Yeah, Parkes, fantastic steerable dish in Australia, and Breakthrough Listen paid for the time here. But what the researcher said then was, it has an incredible, you can't deny signature, is the source is Doppler shifted. So not only is it a single point source, bing, but it's moving, it's orbiting. So because the signal over the time that it can be observed before Parkes disappears, is actually, the signal is in orbit or rotating. But Breakthrough Listen are saying it's a satellite. It's a human interference. Okay, all right. So is there a satellite between Parkes and this signal? No. Is there a satellite that uses the frequencies that you found? No. And is there a satellite that orbits like an exoplanet? No, right? But their paper says we can't confirm it's a non-human intelligence signal, and we think it probably is more likely to be interference. Why are they saying that when it might be a natural phenomenon of our galaxy, but it's definitely a extraterrestrial, meaning outside of the Earth, signal. I don't think it's less likely to be human interference than it is something coming from space. That's my point.
Yeah, interesting. And, I do understand why they want to be 100% sure, because they don't want to have egg on their face. And there's been many times, I spoke to Seth Shostak from there a few different times. And, there's been a few different times that they get all excited about something and then it ends up being something else. And, there's a lot of mysteries in the universe, a lot of things that we're going to be discovering as we go along that we had no clue, or it doesn't make any sense. And I'm really excited about what the web also has been up to, and the amazing, abilities. And, we're going to, you think about where we are, in the arm of Orion, in that the outer arm, in that we get to see so much from here. It's just quite amazing
of our galaxy. Yeah.
And here's another theory. I'm going off the UFO topic, which is okay, but I've always pondered, okay, if they say the universe is not infinite, then what does it come up against a wall? What do you it's such a bizarre thing to try to comprehend.
It's hard, isn't it?
End. Yeah.
Well,
and if there isn't an end,
no, there isn't an end. But that reveals a much bigger question, because if you think about, is there an end? Is there a wall? Is there, obviously we can only sense the visible universe, and the universe, as our visible methods increase, like radio astronomy or James Webb, we see further back in time. And what we're revealing is that the universe is much bigger than we originally thought. And the age of the universe that we have always thought is 13.8 billion years is wrong. I mean, but what's really interesting is that the time and space is made by the expanding universe. There's no such thing as an end. Actual physical three-dimensional space and time is made by something getting bigger. So there was a moment at the early universe where it got really big really fast, and that I'm trying to avoid the word create. It made the universe enormous, and we are beginning to understand it. I mean, Chris Leto and I were going to get together a few weeks ago at a conference about revisionist history of the Big Bang. Was it that actually happened? People are now talking about new cosmology. The James Webb has busted it completely open. It can now see further back to galaxies that should be blobbies, but are fully formed ancient galaxies, which are nearly to what we thought was the age of the universe. Well, that doesn't make any sense. The universe must be older and must be bigger.
Yes.
It's great.
And I've asked several astronomers on this show, is it possible that the Big Bang is wrong? And most of them say, well, there's so much evidence that points to it. But I still think, I believe that it's very possible it's not correct. There's, and then, some of them have the theory that, this is, expanding and contracting, and this may be, a cycle of many times. And I don't, it's so hard to ponder when if you think about, infinite time and all that.
It is. Do your viewers know, this is a BBC program I worked on. Do you know why it was called the Big Bang? So that was such a great story. So in Cambridge, England, there's a big radio telescope, a place called Lourdes Bridge. And there's a senior astronomer there called Martin Ryle. And he had this 1 mile radio telescope. And what he discovered, proved, saw, recorded, was that distant galaxies were moving away. redshifted as they were expanding. The universe was expanding. And so he extrapolated the expansion of distant galaxies to say, well, if they're expanding now, in the past, they were closer together. So you could imagine that they started at a single point. And his greatest opponent to that was Fred Hoyle, who was an atheist. And he didn't like the idea of a creation moment. He didn't want something to burst into being. And he came up with his theory, Fred's theory of the steady state, meaning the universe is evolving and has always been here and it's evolving over time. Maybe it's oscillating, but it's a steady state. And he, being really rude about Martin's expansion theory that didn't really have a name, he called it, some people call it a Big Bang. and he meant it rudely because he thought that was a really horrible term. And the term Big Bang has now stuck and is now describes the expanding universe. Yeah, no, the rivalry between Ryle and Hoyle was unbelievably good story.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. So another thing, I've talked to a lot of people that have had, encounters that are really interesting. And there seems to be a connection with time, like time dilation or something like that. And I wonder, it's this, like one person in particular was just saying that everything seemed like it was in slow motion, kind of like, but it wasn't, that type of thing while he was having this encounter of, a UFO basically over him, type of thing.
I hear the same. John Burroughs certainly, and Jim Penstone both correlate that they think they lost about 45 minutes while they were encompassed in a field. Jim Penstone seeing a craft, John Burroughs seeing energy. But when they emerged from it, when John Burroughs came back and was visible again to Jim, both of them said, where have you been? And time dilation is something that he talks about personally and is quite, concerned about. And you're right. I don't, it's just, I have no idea how it works, but is it something to do with the realm or the advanced physics of UAP? Are they in a universe or in a, that doesn't have time? I mean, that's what we're learning about the quantum universe, is that it's timeless. Everything is connected. I went down this incredible route with Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ, trying to understand how Stanford Research did this thing called remote viewing with Uri Geller. And they explained to me how it taps into a timeless quantum state and how people who are really good at remote viewing didn't see things far away. They saw things back in the future. So they were predicting an emotional response of something that they are about to actually happen to them. They can remember it in the present, something that is about to happen to them. And there's this piece of film which is unbelievable of Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff doing a test with Uri Geller, where they shake a dice in a sealed box, and they open it up and they say, "What's the number on the top, Uri?" And he goes, 4. And it's 4. They go, "Oh, well done. You got it right. It was the number 4. Congratulations." Now, listen to what I just said very carefully. Close the box and shake it again. He keeps on getting it right. And what Uri Geller and Russell told me, he said, the confirmation to Uri that he got it right about a minute after they did it, or 30 seconds after they shook and opened the box, was what Uri has the ability in the present to know about what was about to happen to him. So Uri can sense that he gets it right. Uri can sense that it was the number 4, because he has the ability to tap into a quantum timeless state that we think that everybody can tap into through premonitions and gut reactions, but he was good at it. I mean, he also bent spoons, but there were a lot of other people who are very good at remote viewing, who did the same ability, who have the ability to tap into a timeless connective universe. And once we go down that whole understanding of consciousness and how we understand time, and does the brain, are we aware of the quantum universe, which of course is, we're so lucky to live in 2025, because that's a real big thing that people are looking at right now. So that's what I've been hearing.
Well, interesting. Well, thank you so much. And we can find you on YouTube under PROF Simon, Professor Simon. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Really enjoyed it. Hope to have you back on again.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure as well. We touched on some really interesting topics, and there's going to be really good ones happening in our world right now. We are living at a time where everything is really interesting. So with disclosure, with breaking news, we're not alone in the universe, and knowing what UAPs are and understanding consciousness, we need to talk more. So thank you.
That's right. All right, you take care. And remember, everyone, to keep your eyes